Well, hello, folks out there in YouTube land. Got a big show lined up for you, and let's get right on into it. All right, folks, no Harbaugh, no problem. Michigan handles Penn State, and Paul Finebaum lays into Michigan. He is not a happy camper about them, and especially their fan base. And Michigan also, they filed for a temporary restraining order, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Penn State, who was so upset over the game Saturday that they have fired their offensive coordinator. So we're going to get into a whole lot of stuff right now. All right, folks, before we get started, I do want to go over these stats because they're remarkable. I've never seen anything to equal it. J.J. McCarthy, 7 for 8, 60 yards. Drew Aller, 10 for 22 for 70 yards. Is this 1962? Have they forgotten the forward pass? Good grief. You're talking about a throwback. If y'all watch this game, you want to talk about Michigan against the world. Every single fan base in the country was rooting against them, especially Ohio State, as you can imagine. So they've had to kind of embrace the villain role. They might as well. And it's kind of an interesting place to be because you can really see a team pulled together. And Michigan played pretty darn well. They were tough, and they won up front, which was key to this game, obviously. When you look how they did, they ran the ball with Blake Corum, who has a business together with Connor Stallions, which you may or may not know about. They've got an LLC, which Corum claims he doesn't know about, where they're selling used vacuum cleaners. And for some reason, Connor Stallions is into vacuum cleaners. I don't know why.
I said, don't disturb you. I'm cleaning my room.
But anyway, when you look at these numbers, Blake had 145 yards. Edwards had 52. So they ran for 227 yards. And Penn State did okay. They ran for 164. But this is just pitiful right up here, 74 yards and 60. And Penn State is slow. Everybody on their team is just, where is the speed at? They've got no deep threat, it doesn't appear. All they could do is just throw to a tight end occasionally and hand the ball off. And again, they did fire their offensive coordinator. They were that upset about it. This is in Yahoo Sports by Sam Cooper. It says Penn State fired their offensive coordinator, Mike Urick, following loss to Michigan. Here it talks about James Franklin announced Sunday that he fired offensive coordinator who was in his third season in the role. The move comes as a day as Penn State was only able to put up 238 yards of offense, 75 yards of which came in the final minute scoring drive when the outcome was already decided. So, yeah, that was a big game. And James Franklin obviously had it. That was one of the most boring games to watch I've ever seen. I don't know that Penn State could have done a whole lot. They couldn't get anybody open, and they weren't getting a whole lot of time to throw the ball. And it just wasn't much to watch. It really looked very old school, and Michigan kind of pushed them around pretty well. And that was at Penn State. So, the crowd was very much in the favor of State, and they just couldn't handle Michigan. Michigan just pushed them around. And, of course, Jimbo Fisher is getting fired, and they're in the midst of that. I'll cover that in another video. I've got too much other stuff going on. Plus, I had to work all weekend, so I was pretty tied up.
Well, the world needs ditch diggers, too.
But let's get into this temporary restraining order, which I told you they were going to file. There was no question. They tried to get it done prior to the game, but because the national holiday, they just weren't able to get it done. So let's see what they're up to. And this is in Yahoo Sports by Richard Johnson. It says Michigan files temporary restraining order seeking to block Jim Harbaugh suspension. They're trying to stop Big Ten Commissioner Petitti, who's already suspended him for 3 games, which is the rest of the season. And they filed an emergency TRO against the Big Ten. It's the latest escalation in a high-stakes battle, that's for sure. It says Harbaugh is the co-plaintiff in the case, along with the Board of Regents of the University of Michigan, obviously. The defendants are the Big Ten Conference and Tony Petitti. And the motion was filed in the District Court of Ann Arbor, which is a pretty good location to file it, to say the least. In its motion, a request for the court to issue an order without giving the Big Ten a chance to respond. Michigan argued that the conference breached a contract, succumbed to pressure, and threw procedure out the window in pursuit of summary punishment. It says the school has not interviewed a single witness and has access to, at most, the NCAA's incomplete investigation. They ignored the procedures that would have allowed the university to defend itself, and Michigan argued that they can only impose punishment after an investigation due process. Basically, they want due process and a right to appeal, which would take quite a bit of time. And Michigan expects a ruling one way or the other before Saturday's noon kickoff, according to a source. So typically there is a duty judge essentially on call outside of normal court hours to handle situations like that, who would have likely been communicated with earlier today and given a heads up The judge assigned to the TRO in this case is Timothy P. Connors, a Michigan undergrad alum and lectured at the university's law school, though he will be expected to be impartial.
Right.
Right. Okay. So he graduated from Michigan and also lectured there. I think that's okay. And lastly, we need to talk about Paul Finebaum. He's had it with the Michigan fans, obviously, and he was recently on ESPN's Matt Berry show, and they were talking about Michigan, and he just went out and said it. He said they are the most obnoxious fan base in the country. You know, don't hold back any, Finebaum. That's a heck of a statement, too, coming out of the SEC. He also said they're not Ohio State. They're not that good. They need to understand that, basically. He said they're insecure. They are consumed with their own self-worth in a false way. And there is also no more sniveling fan base in the country. Holy crap. Now, Paul, don't hold back. Just tell us what you think. So obviously he's taking a lot of grief from the Michigan fan base. And I kind of don't think this is going to tamp it down to go out on a TV show or a podcast like that and say those things. But I guess he's obviously been hearing it from them. And I've taken some grief. It just is what it is. You know, I mean, they feel very under attack, and they're sort of cornered, and it's kind of Michigan against the world, so they probably feel that way, and they're lashing out a lot, I would think. Now, I haven't taken much grief because, you know, I try not to be too brutal, but Finebaum obviously has, and I think the folks at ESPN have as well. So anyway, there's just a lot going on with the Michigan thing, and I will cover the Jimbo Fisher thing. And I typically cover the SEC and the Vols and all that, but what drugged me into this was the whole Michigan sign-stealing scheme that they had been running and how that affected other teams, including probably Tennessee and Clemson, because there's a person with direct knowledge that's involved in this case that actually has said that Connor Stallions and Michigan had actually reached out to other teams to try to help them to wreck other teams' path to the college football playoff in 2022, Tennessee and Clemson being a couple of them. So that brought me right on in. And I'm watching that one, and that'll come out at some point in the NCAA if it's true. And it is a rumor, but it's got a lot of smoke, and I'll be staying on top of that one. But anyway, that's what's going on with Michigan. I will cover the Jimbo, like I said, and I'll be taking a look and seeing what's going on with the Vols after it really was a bad loss for us. Losing to Missouri, that stunk. And if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button. Lets me know to continue to cover the SEC, now the Big Ten, and especially this Michigan thing, and then the Ohio State game coming up, my Vols, anything else that comes across the front of my screen. And if you've not subscribed, it's right here on your right, my left. Just hit this little button. It will help you get my videos. And if you want to keep tabs on all these running sagas, just hit that little button right there. It'll make it easy for you. It doesn't cost you a penny. And right over here is the most recent video that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. And we'll see you next time on Sports Talk Jay.